Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Congratulations to everyone who is the recipient of an award tonight. It's a very good night to be British because three of the finest acts of the last 30 years that came out of Britain are here tonight and being honored. I'm here to honor and present the award to Elvis Costello and The Attractions. And I'm going to talk more about Elvis, and Elvis is going to do The Attractions, okay? Elvis Costello was born Declan Patrick McManus, and his mother's maiden name was Costello, so he had half of it there. And like me, he came from a musical family. My dad played in a dance band, and his dad, Ross McManus, was the singer for the Joe Loss Orchestra, along with the fabulous Rose Brennan. You're probably all too young from England to remember, but they gave me so much pleasure when I grew up. So not only has Elvis given me a lot of pleasure with his fantastic music and songs, but his dad was responsible for me to tuning in the radio to listen to the Joe Loss Orchestra, and he was a bloody good singer. His mum worked in a record shop, and I envy her that because it's one thing I've always wanted to do. And she worked in the record department of Selfridges, so he had an incredibly sort of sponge-like atmosphere to grow up in, as I did as well. I mean, at 9, I was given Songs for Swinging Lovers by my dad, by Frank Sinatra. I wasn't too fucking happy about it at the time, but... But by 9, Elvis was a fan of Mel Torme, Ella Fitzgerald, great singers like that. And then, because of his dad's association with the Joe Loss Orchestra, he grew up rubbing shoulders with the Hollies and the Mersey Beats and Engelbert Humperdinck and the Beatles. So, you know, he had a kind of amazing kind of repertoire to draw on at an early age. And at 12 years old, his dad bought him a guitar. And it's the same year, 1966, as 3 rather good albums came out. Revolver by the Beatles, Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan, and Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Can't really beat those 3, can you? I mean, so his musical tastes then grew to rhythm and blues, which of course every person in our neck of the woods, whether it be Ireland or Great Britain, owes their musical heritage to, their influence. We were all influenced and started playing music by black artists because that was the best music to play and to listen to. And from then, his influences like Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, and then he, you know, you can tell with his music and his songwriting, listening to it later, he's like a chameleon, Elvis. He writes such wonderful lyrics, but his songs have no musical boundaries, and that's why I love what he does. He's never been afraid to take a chance, never been afraid to take a risk. Elvis Costello is completely his own man when it comes to deciding what music he's going to make. He's gone off on several tangents. The album Almost Blue, which is one of my favorite albums he's ever done. He sings the songs of great country acts like Merle Haggard, Don Gibson, Graham Parsons, George Jones, and it's a wonderful, wonderful album. And at a time that he was doing it, it was, well, not a risk, but it was, you know, not what everyone would expect someone like Elvis Costello to do. In 1976, I'm sort of going all over the place here, but he changed his name. I mean, you can't really... I was Reginald Kenneth Dwight, and there was no fucking way that I was going to be Reginald Kenneth Dwight when my first album came out. So I chose a name that I thought would be different. Elton. I couldn't think of anybody except an obscure English folk artist called Elton Hayes who had the name Elton. And I chose John from Long John Baldry. Elvis had Costello from his mother's maiden name, but he had to choose a name to go with it, and the cheeky fucker chose Elvis. I mean, really. I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily his idea because he was managed by Dave Robinson and Jake Riviera, and I'm sure they had something to do with it. But I know, what a fucking nerve, Elvis. And boy, oh boy, did that work, because, you know, after Elvis Presley came Elvis Costello, who was totally different in music, but just as influential to people who followed him. Great deal of credit must go to the Attractions, who Pete Thomas, Bruce Thomas, Steve Neve. The first album, My Aim Is True, didn't have the Attractions on it. It was produced by Nick Lowe, who's a fucking great producer and a British legend in his own right. And for a first album, I remember my first album, and it had one good song on it, and his first album had Allison and Watching the Detectives on it, so, I mean, that wasn't a bad start. And, you know, that came in at 32 in America, and a new star was born. Another Elvis hit the charts. But the next album, This Year's Model, with Pump It Up, which you just heard, Radio, and I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea, was an amazing album. It debuted at 4 in England and 3 in America, and truly, people were taking notice of what was an incredible resurgence in English music. I remember sitting in bed one day at about 12:30 looking to this weekend show on a Sunday hosted by a British girl called Janet Street Porter, and it was about the Sex Pistols, The Clash, and Susie and the Banshees, and I was sitting there and they're going, well, he's a fucking old fart, Elton John, he's fucking boring, and I was going, what the fuck is going on here? But you know what? They had a point. It was necessary at the time of this surge of great British creative music that had this wave of energy to it, this incredible energy. Sex Pistols, Clash, Susie and the Banshee, The Police, Elvis Costello, and The Attractions. As I said before, Elvis, you can't pinpoint him. These are some of the people that he's collaborated with in his career. George Jones, Paul McCartney, Nick Lowe, Daryl Hall, Burt Bacharach. Now there's a fucking challenge. I mean, doing an album with Burt Bacharach, I wouldn't be so terrified, because Burt Bacharach is God to me. And there Elvis goes and makes an album with Burt Bacharach and pulls it off. And he's also done classical music with the Brodsky Quartet and Sophie von Otter. And I know he's written some other stuff that will be coming out shortly. Also, he's collaborated with T-Bone Burnett, who's also a fantastic musician and producer. So, I mean, from George Jones to Paul McCartney to Anne-Sophie von Otter to Burt Bacharach, here's a man who knows no rules, whose love of music and of songwriting and of craftsmanship has led him to take the chance to write these kind of songs with these people, to do this different sort of music. I always thought my best album was Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, because it was not a particularly commercial album. And I think Elvis Presley, there you go. See, what a bastard. Elvis Costello's finest album, I always thought, was Imperial Bedroom. I thought it was a masterpiece, and it wasn't the most successfully commercial album, but who gives a shit? It was a fucking amazing album. Albums like Blood and Chocolate, King of America, Spike, the Juliet Letters, All This Useless Beauty, Painted from Memory, which was the Burt Bacharach album, For the Stars, which was the Anne-Sophie von Otter album, and up to the latest album, which was so great, When I Was Cruel. I'm so impressed by this man's total knowledge of music that came before him. It's very important, I always stress it, to actually listen to the great masters who came before us. The man on stage before us was talking about the great Motown rhythm section and how many times we listened to those on headphones and saying, how did they do that? Elvis did his homework. He was influenced by the greats, and then he didn't give a shit. It came out the way he wanted it to come out. And as I said, he's always played by his own rules. He's never chased the commercial route, which is not what can be said of me. But hey, you know, someone's got to pay for this hair. I am a great fan, and always will be, And I think we will be hearing more from Elvis Costello, more surprising music, more great music. One other thing which is completely irrelevant, as a porno fanatic myself, not the straight variety, I have to say, there was a series of porno films made in the 1970s produced by a guy called William Higgins. And the music was really good, which is, it makes a change, you know? And the guy who wrote it, his name was Costello Presley. And I have a feeling that Elvis is hiding something. But what you heard tonight is just a sample of what this great band, Elvis Costello and the Attractions, did when they made this year's model and when they went out on tour and they blew everybody away. I'm sorry I'm so brief on the Attractions, but I say Elvis is going to make that amends when he comes and talks. And so I won't go on any more further, but say it is an incredible privilege. I've inducted the Beach Boys, I've inducted Dusty Springfield. Oh, another thing, Elvis Costello, I remember reading in a paper, he was seen at a Dusty Springfield concert, so I knew he was a good fucking guy. And it is my incredible honor and privilege to present a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame award to the Attractions and Elvis Costello.
I have to thank Sir Elton for that very eloquent and very complimentary and deeply profane speech. I just really, he's completely, I'll go along the way he started, he's completely fucked it up for me now because he's just made a list of all the people I was going to mention. But he did make a mention of Mima and Pa. And I do want to thank them for teaching me to listen and making me curious. I also want to thank Jill Taylor and Lou Difford for their care and advice and friendship, and all the people at my office by 11. I particularly want to thank Paddy Callahan, Robbie McLeod, and Milo Lewis, and everybody in our crew over the years, everybody that's been in our crew that's actually got us to the gigs and sometimes propped us up at the microphone long enough to play a set. When we started out, we had about 35 minutes of music, and on a good night, we could get it down to 25. We want to send out a little personal note. I just want to send out lots of love to Flaky and Viv, who are not here tonight. But I want to thank my agent, Marsha Vlasic, my agent of 25 years, for her love and dedication and tenacity, which allowed us to keep on playing the music after the record company had lost interest, which was fairly regularly. Now for the record industry, it's my favorite part. And music's mortal enemy, radio. No. Believe me, tonight is not the night for that. It wasn't always that bad. You know, as Elton mentioned, Jake Revere and Dave Robinson, they had some good slogans and considerable amount of daring do. And I also want to thank Greg Geller and Joe McEwen. I want to thank him twice, once at Columbia, once at Warner Brothers. And a gentleman who's going to be on it a little bit later, I want to thank Mo Lenny and Stephen for letting me make some bold records in the last days before the corporate radios came and fucked up the record industry completely, you know. Finally, I'd like to thank Chris Roberts at Universal Classics, because if it wasn't for his ideas, I probably wouldn't be making records at all right now. There are names I could acknowledge, but you know what they say, the good people know who they are, the bad people know where I live. Obviously, there are the producers that we work with. Elton mentioned Nick Lowe, the first man that I ever knew that was in a band. And I have absolutely no idea why Nick is not standing up here with us, picking up one of these. He definitely should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We've been very lucky. We've worked with really amazing producers. Jeff Emmerich, the incredible Jeff Emmerich, Billy Sherrill, Mitchell Froome, Clive Lang, Alan Winstanley, the Imposter team, Kevin Killen, and my brother T-Bone Burnett. There are some people without whose example I wouldn't be writing or singing, and if you'll bear with me just a second, feel free to cheer if you hear any names you love. But these are the people that mean a lot to me. Franz Schubert, Lennon and McCartney, Rodgers and Hart, Strummer and Jones, Difford and Tilbrook, Holland Dozier Holland, Randy Newman, Brian Wilson, Dusty Springfield, Graham Parsons, Georgie Fame, Curtis Mayfield, Dan Penn, Charles Mingus, Tom Waits, Frank Sinatra, George Jones, David Ackles, Sonny Boy Williamson, Van Morrison, Rick Danko, and most of all, Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell. It's amazing how we can all just applaud that stuff, isn't it? You know, we could go on for hours and hours with this stuff. Elton's already told you that some of the people that I've been fortunate enough to work with, obviously, you can't really imagine when you listen to the radio, and my dad was bringing home stacks of records when I was 9 years old, that one day I'd be writing songs with Paul McCartney or Burt Bacharach. But the other people that he mentioned that probably lie outside a lot of people's definition of rock and roll, Anne-Sophie Vanatta, the Brodsky Quartet, Roy Nathanson, the Fairfield Four, Chet Baker, these people, they taught me a tremendous amount, but it's the musicians that I've worked with, and I've had the real great pleasure and privilege to work with a number of bands that are not the Attractions, the Confederates, the Rude Five, and the band that played before, the Imposters. But the band that really deserves the credit for starting the whole thing going are two members of the Imposters who are also members of the Attractions. Pete Thomas, who I actually believe is the greatest rock drummer in the world, and it was with the money of a major record company that we managed to get him back from California to play on my second album. So we've been swindling the business all this time, and they still haven't found out. Steve Naive. Steve Naive was, I think, 19 years old when we kidnapped him from the Royal Academy, and I don't know whether he was destined for the concert platform playing classical music, but he's brought every kind of artistry to the songs that I've written, whether it be rock and roll or ballads, and we've also toured together, and it's a tremendous joy to play with him anytime, and he's a wonderful composer in his own right. And last of all, Bruce, who played the great bass lines on all of the records of the Attractions. It's no big secret that we haven't always got along, but I've got to say that seeing Luce and Joe Strummer's daughters down there makes me realise that this is not the place for airing like petty grievances and things that are obscure to all of you. Really want to say I miss Joe very much, and he was a great, great man. So I'm really glad to throw the podium open to the guys, and ladies and gentlemen, the best band in the world, The Attractions.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll. It's true that Ian Dury associated these words, and in my mind, they'll be there forever. Some people not with us today have played too much with these deep, dark pleasures, and I first of all want to salute them. If you've ever visited the museum in Cleveland, it's like all museums, a collection of fascinating histories, of glamour, of dreams, and accidents that will happen. I'd like to thank Above all, the young men and women who did their rock and roll thing, probably in E major, and produced, in particular, 3 very welcome accidents. Bruce Thomas, with his amazing virtuosity, never satisfied. Pete Thomas, an infinite spring of positive energy. And Declan, always searching and finding and taking us to new musical perspectives with his riskiness and the mastery of his words. Thank you, EC. In a sense, we all belong to the ultimate rock and roll band, the human race. And very rare are the bands that have not experienced a moment of conflict. But the solution to conflicts can't be a war. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. I'd love the deciders of our countries, particularly as they seem to be the countries of the rock and roll, to listen to those words. And even better, to pay attention to the words of Elvis Costello, diving for dear life when we could be diving for pearls. Thank you, Elvis. I'm really proud to be a part of this legend so far. Thank you.
Just want to say hello to my wife, Judy, my daughter, Tennessee, who's a young drummer now, so hopefully she'll be up here one day. My mum and dad, Phil and Sheila, and my oldest mate, Paul Riley, bassman Riley, without whom none of this would be possible. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the memories. That's it.
wicked world, searching for light in darkness of insanity. I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only pain and hatred and misery? Each time I feel like this inside, one thing I want to know: what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Oh, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Troubled time, my spirit gets so downhearted sometimes. So where I be strong, yeah, who I to trust in? Where is the harmony, sweet harmony? Each time I feel it slipping away, just makes me wanna cry. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Oh, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? So funny that peace, love, and understanding. Oh, what's so funny that peace, love, and understanding? Oh, what's so funny that peace, love, and understanding?
Damn, son, where'd you find this?